Why you should become dangerous. Jung on the power of shadow integration. Have you ever noticed how the truly kind people in your life, the ones you trust with anything, aren't pushovers? There's something about them, a quiet strength that tells you they could be formidable if they needed to be. Yet they choose gentleness instead. This isn't a coincidence. It's evidence of one of Carl Jung's most profound psychological insights. The safest people are those who have integrated their capacity for danger. I'd rather be whole than good, Jung famously said. This seemingly simple statement contains a revolutionary idea. That true psychological health isn't about being purely nice or moral. It's about becoming complete, which includes acknowledging and integrating the darker, more dangerous aspects of your nature. Today, I want to explore why Jung believed that becoming dangerous in the right way might be the most important psychological work you ever do. Let me start with something that happened to me a few years ago. I was in line at a coffee shop when a visibly agitated man started shouting at the barista, getting increasingly aggressive over some minor issue with his order. Everyone froze, eyes down, pretending not to notice as the situation escalated. Everyone except one man. He was about 60, soft-spoken, wearing reading glasses and a cardigan. The last person you'd expect to step into a confrontation. Yet he calmly moved between the aggressor and the barista and said, "That's enough." Just those two words, but with such quiet authority that the angry customer actually stopped mid-sentence. What struck me wasn't just his intervention, but the complete absence of either fear or aggression in his demeanor. He wasn't scared, and he wasn't trying to dominate. He simply, calmly established a boundary. The angry customer muttered something and left. Later, I chatted with this man and learned he'd been a hostage negotiator before retiring. Most people, he told me, are either too aggressive or too timid in difficult situations because they're afraid of their own capacity for both. This man embodied what Jung meant by shadow integration. He knew he could be dangerous. He had confronted and accepted that capacity within himself. And that very awareness allowed him to respond from choice rather than fear or unconscious impulse. Jung believed that most of us spend enormous energy trying to maintain a self-image of being good by denying our darker impulses, our anger, our selfishness, our capacity for destruction. We split ourselves into a conscious light identity, who we think we are, and a shadow self that contains everything we don't want to acknowledge. The problem with this approach is that it doesn't actually make us good. It makes us unconscious. And what we're unconscious of, we don't control. Think about the person who insists they're the nicest person ever, but explodes with surprising rage when provoked. Or the moralistic preacher who rails against sin while secretly engaging in the very behaviors they condemn. Or the pacifist whose passive aggression cuts deeper than any direct confrontation. These are all examples of unintegrated shadows. The dangerous aspects of self being expressed unconsciously, precisely because they've been denied consciously. Jung observed this pattern repeatedly. The more vigorously we deny our capacity for darkness, the more likely it is to emerge in distorted, truly destructive ways. Our rejected shadows don't disappear. They operate autonomously, beyond our awareness or control. This is why Jung made the radical suggestion that true psychological health requires us to acknowledge the full range of our nature, including our capacity for destruction, selfishness, rage, and darkness. Not to act these out indiscriminately, but to bring them into consciousness where they can be integrated and directed purposefully. I remember a client, let's call her Lisa, who came to therapy because she kept ending up in relationships where she was taken advantage of. She identified as a kind, giving person who couldn't hurt a fly. She was proud of never getting angry and always putting others first. But as we explored her patterns, it became clear that her kindness wasn't entirely authentic. It was partly driven by fear of her own anger, fear of being seen as selfish, fear of conflict. Because she couldn't acknowledge her own needs or set boundaries, she attracted people who exploited her giving nature, leaving her depleted and resentful. The turning point came when Lisa finally allowed herself to access her anger, not to lash out destructively, but to recognize her capacity for self-protection. She discovered she could say no, could set firm boundaries, could stand her ground in conflict. She became, in a controlled and conscious way, more dangerous. The paradoxical result? Her relationships improved dramatically. She attracted healthier partners who respected her boundaries. Her authentic kindness flowed more freely because it was now a choice rather than a compulsion or a defense. By integrating her shadow, her capacity for healthy selfishness and protective anger, she became both stronger and more genuinely compassionate. This is the core of Jung's insight. Integration of the shadow doesn't make us more destructive. It makes us more whole, more conscious, and ultimately more capable of genuine goodness. Think about it this way. Who would you trust more to watch over something precious? Someone who has never acknowledged their capacity for harm and believes they're incapable of it? Or someone who has confronted their darker impulses, made peace with them, and developed the strength to choose when and how to express them? The truly trustworthy person isn't the one who has never felt rage, selfish impulses, or the desire for power. It's the person who recognizes these capacities within themselves and has developed the consciousness to direct them constructively. This principle explains why some of history's most genuinely virtuous individuals often acknowledge their familiarity with the darkness. They don't claim moral superiority or purity. They simply demonstrate the discipline of conscious choice. Gandhi once confessed, "I know my own capacity for violence, which is why I've dedicated my life to nonviolence." Martin Luther King Jr. spoke openly about his struggles with anger. These weren't admissions of weakness, but expressions of integrated strength. Their moral choices carried weight precisely because they were choices, not the absence of alternative impulses. Jung observed that truly moral action can only come from this place of wholeness, where we act not from unconscious programming or self-delusion, but from full awareness of our capacities and conscious choice about how to express them. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, Jung wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the essential paradox of shadow integration. We become safer, more ethical, and more genuinely good, not by denying our capacity for darkness, but by acknowledging and integrating it. So, what does this integration look like in practice? How do we become dangerous in the healthy way Jung advocated. First, it requires honest self-examination. What aspects of yourself do you deny or judge harshly in others? What emotions do you consider unacceptable? What needs or desires do you automatically suppress? These are all clues to your shadow content. I encourage my clients to pay special attention to their strongest reactions to others. If someone's behavior triggers intense judgment or disgust in you, it often points to a disowned aspect of yourself. This doesn't mean you should engage in that behavior, but it suggests there's something there worth examining within yourself. For example, if you're intensely irritated by someone's ambition or self-promotion, it might reflect your own disowned competitive drives. If you're harshly judgmental of someone's neediness, it might point to your unacknowledged vulnerability. Our strongest moral reactions often reveal our shadow material. The next step is to create safe context to acknowledge and explore these disowned aspects. This doesn't mean acting them out destructively, but allowing yourself to experience them consciously, perhaps through journaling, therapy, artistic expression, or physical practices that channel intensity safely. I've often recommended controlled physical practices for clients working with shadow integration. Boxing classes, intense workouts, or martial arts training can provide safe containers to experience aggression, power, and intensity without harmful consequences. A client who had spent his life suppressing anger found that kickboxing classes allowed him to feel his full power for the first time. "I realized I could throw a punch if I needed to," he told me. "And that made me feel less anxious in confrontations. I didn't need to actually hit anyone. Just knowing I could change something fundamental in how I carried myself." This is what healthy shadow integration looks like. Not indulging destructive impulses, but acknowledging their existence and finding appropriate channels for the energy they contain. The goal isn't to become more aggressive or self-centered, but to reclaim the vital energy that gets trapped in shadow material. When we deny aspects of ourselves, we don't eliminate them. We just lose conscious access to the life force they contain. This is why shadow integration often leads to a significant increase in available energy, creativity, and authenticity. As Jung put it, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The payoff for this difficult work is profound. As you integrate shadow aspects, several transformations typically occur. First, you become less projecting. When you acknowledge your own capacity for aggression, selfishness, or manipulation, you're less likely to unconsciously project these qualities onto others. This leads to clearer perception and more authentic relationships. Second, you gain access to vital psychological resources. The capacity for healthy anger, for example, provides energy for setting boundaries and protecting what matters. Acknowledging your shadow doesn't mean becoming controlled by these energies. It means having them available when truly needed. Third, you develop genuine moral choice. True ethical behavior comes not from suppressing bad impulses, but from conscious decisions about how to channel your full range of capacities. As Jung noted, the conscious realization of what the shadow stands for, namely, the inferior and primitive aspects of our nature, brings this dilemma to the surface. Will I give in to my shadow, or take up the battle against it. This battle isn't about elimination, but integration, bringing shadow material into relationship with our conscious values so that we have choice rather than compulsion. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, you become more authentically yourself. Jung believed that much of what we call neurosis stems from the tension of trying to be only part of who we are. When we reclaim our disowned aspects, this tension relaxes, allowing more authentic self-expression. I've seen this transformation countless times in my practice. People who begin therapy rigidly identified with being nice, logical, strong, or independent gradually discover the freedom of embracing their full humanity, including the aspects they previously rejected. The woman who prided herself on always being rational discovers the wisdom in her emotions. The man who built his identity around never needing help experiences the relief of allowing vulnerability. The perfect parent acknowledges their moments of frustration and resentment, becoming more genuinely connected to their children as a result. This is the ultimate gift of shadow integration. It allows us to be real, and paradoxically, it's only when we're real that we can be truly good in the ways that matter. Of course, shadow integration is not without risks. There's always the danger of using these ideas to rationalize genuinely destructive behavior. "I'm just integrating my shadow" can become an excuse for acting out impulses indiscriminately rather than bringing them into conscious relationship with values and ethics. This is why Jung emphasized that shadow work must be approached with both courage and discipline. The goal isn't to eliminate conscience or boundaries, but to ensure they're based on conscious choice rather than unconscious compensation. True integration is about holding the tension between opposing aspects of self, being capable of strength and vulnerability, selfishness and generosity, intensity and gentleness, depending on what the situation genuinely requires. This capacity to hold tension without collapsing into one extreme or the other is what Jung called the transcendent function, the psychological mechanism that allows for genuine growth and the emergence of a more complete self. It's also what makes a person trustworthy in the deepest sense. The individual who has integrated their shadow doesn't need to prove their goodness through rigid adherence to rules or roles. They can respond authentically to each unique situation from the full range of their human capacities. Think about who you'd want beside you in a genuine crisis. Someone who has never faced their own darkness and might be overwhelmed when confronted with it. Or someone who knows their capacity for both creation and destruction and has developed the discernment to use each appropriately. This is why I believe we need more genuinely dangerous people. Individuals who have confronted and integrated their shadows, who know their capacity for darkness and have developed the consciousness to direct it purposefully. I'm not talking about physically intimidating people or those who cultivate an aggressive persona. I mean people who have done the difficult psychological work of acknowledging their full range of capacities for selfishness and generosity, anger and compassion, destruction and creation, and develop the wisdom to express them appropriately. These are the people who can remain calm in crisis, who can set boundaries without cruelty, who can protect without becoming the thing they are fighting against. They're dangerous in the sense that they know their power, but safe because they've developed the consciousness to use it responsibly. As Jung put it, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. For no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. This act is the essential condition for any kind of self-knowledge. This self-knowledge is not an abstract philosophical pursuit. It's the foundation of genuine psychological maturity. Without it, we remain forever at the mercy of unconscious forces, playing out patterns we don't understand and cannot control. So how do you begin this journey of shadow integration? How do you become dangerous in the healthy way Jung described? Start by getting curious about what you judge most harshly in others. What behaviors or qualities trigger your strongest negative reactions? These are often clues to your own shadow material. Pay attention to your dreams and fantasies. They often contain shadow elements seeking expression. What are the recurring themes? What parts of yourself do they represent that might need acknowledgement? Notice where you feel most rigid or defensive in your self-concept. If you pride yourself on always being rational, what happens when emotions arise? If your identity is built around being kind, how do you handle your own anger or selfish desires? The places where we're least flexible often point to shadow material we're working hard to repress. Consider where you might be unconsciously leaking shadow content. Do you find yourself making cutting remarks disguised as jokes? Do you procrastinate on tasks that would benefit you? Do you undermine your own success in subtle ways? These patterns often reveal shadow material, finding indirect expression. As you identify shadow aspects, remember that integration doesn't mean indulgence. It means bringing these elements into consciousness where you can relate to them intentionally, rather than being controlled by them unconsciously. This process isn't easy or comfortable. There's a reason we push certain aspects of ourselves into the shadow in the first place. They often conflict with our conscious values or self-image. Facing them requires courage and usually some guidance from a therapist, mentor, or spiritual practice. But the rewards are profound. As you reclaim these disowned parts of yourself, you'll likely experience increased energy, more authentic relationships, greater creative capacity, and, paradoxically, more consistent alignment with your deepest values. You'll become, in the best sense, more dangerous. Not because you're more likely to cause harm, but because you've acknowledged your capacity for both creation and destruction, and developed the consciousness to direct these forces purposefully. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, Jung reminded us, but by making the darkness conscious. This journey into the shadow isn't a detour from the path of growth. It is the path, and its destination isn't darkness, but a more complete, integrated light. If you found value in this exploration of shadow integration, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that delves into the depths of human psychology. Every day, we explore topics that challenge conventional wisdom and offer new perspectives on what it means to be human. Until next time, remember, the safest people aren't those who've never confronted their capacity for darkness. They're the ones who know exactly what they're capable of and have developed the wisdom to use that capacity consciously and constructively.